Welcome to Roundtail Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Leslie.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a while.
It's been a minute.
I'm back.
It's okay. Lillian has been holding down the fort.
Thankfully.
You should look at the time stamps on the... She and I like to chat.
Rich conversations.
Rich.
Yep.
Full. Some might say meandering because of our... how we
meandering interests.
Yes, I think today's going to feel tighter.
Great.
And I know some audience members will be glad for that. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me about what we're talking about today.
All right. I'm going to talk about children in a biblical text here.
Okay.
Yeah. I find that this text is one that was calling out to me, and maybe we'll figure out why.
I love it.
By the end of our time together. So we're going to use this text this coming Sunday, actually, and I'm only going to make this little sidebar comment without getting too much into that particular topic. But in 1963, there was a march that became known as the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama, and it happened at a point in time when the civil rights movement, being led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and many other wonderful colleagues, was in real trouble, and it needed something to galvanize it. And it turned out that it was the courageous actions of children that did that, children and teens. It was an enormously risky and dangerous time, and especially to allow or even encourage children and youth to be involved in a march where there were so many forces arrayed against them. It was a daring thing to do, but risky. But it's important to know that, as one of the children said at the time, you know, people asked us if we were scared, and we were scared if we didn't march. Wow. We were scared about what was going to happen to us if we didn't stand up. At some point in life, in history, we may be asked to make that kind of a stand, and they did. And from then on, I think some people even feel that the great "I Have a Dream" speech, which happened later that year, might not have happened had it not been for Birmingham. So that was great, and a great moment, actually, in American history, not just the civil rights movement. But it makes me think of this passage that's in the Gospel according to Matthew. And this is a time when these disciples, they're an amazing group. We can relate.
Yeah.
In some ways.
I don't know why the word hapless
to them,
to mind.
Trying to find their way, groping through the darkness, And it's funny because they've got the light of the world right there, but right. It's not easy for them. So at that time, this is how it starts off. The disciples came to Jesus and asked. So you get the sense that they've been huddling somewhere, And no, you go. You ask him.
You talk to him.
Right? And they asked, it says, somebody asked, would be my guess, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And I love this question because even though Jesus has been talking about the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven as a subversive version, right? Mm-hmm. They still, in their minds, they're thinking empire. Different empire, right? Okay, it's not Caesar's empire, but it's God's empire. So they sort of think that there's going to be a pecking order, greatest all the way to least. And by the way, where do we stand?
Right.
Jesus tell us, because closest to you, we're thinking, right? We may be up there at the top. So in response, bless their little hearts, he called a child. That must have come as a surprise, whom he put among them and said, truly, I tell you. So this is like, now hear this, now hear this. Unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child, and you can see this poor child like blink, blink.
Like, what did I do?
In the middle of this crowd of, men and then others who are witnessing. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And then it gets a little sterner after that. If any of you, now you wonder, is he just talking to disciples now, or maybe everybody who's there like us, put a stumbling block before one of those little ones who believe in me, It would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea.
There's an image.
Jesus, gentle, meek, and mild. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes.
I don't know that I've ever actually heard that as fully as I did just now. This idea of like, yes, stumbling blocks are going to come, but you better not be putting them there on purpose.
Right. So I think it's interesting to hold those two texts together.
Yeah.
Because the first part of it sounds wonderful, that we applaud in adults a certain kind of childlikeness because it's fun, and it may be the way that we choose to describe someone who's creative, a free spirit, not bound by social convention. That sounds nice. But Jesus is actually talking about a child, and I can't imagine, unless we think about someone with a particularly communicable disease, that there was anyone in Jesus' lifetime who would have been considered more expendable than a child. They had no social value, certainly not from the perspective of the Roman Empire.
All right.
And when the disciples approach Jesus and ask who's the greatest, they can't be thinking of a child.
No.
Right? They're thinking of a position of authority. They're thinking about a certain kind of leadership role. They're thinking maybe of something with a title. And because Jesus has titles, Son of Man, Son of God, Messiah, maybe they're thinking along those lines, and Jesus undermines all of that. Whatever the kingdom of heaven is, it's unlike all of those trappings. It doesn't come with any of that machinery. And by pushing it, now he's starting to ask, so it's not just a matter of, acknowledging a child as the greatest, but let's stop for a moment and think about who are the persons, who are the organizations that are actually presenting stumbling blocks to the flourishing of a child, because the news is not good for them. And basically he's saying, you who are a stumbling block in those ways, you need to change.
Yeah.
And you need to get out of their way. You need to find a way to help them to flourish. So these two things it's important to hold them together. And I'm thinking about this also because whether we are thinking about the future of children affected potentially by climate change or by governmental, resources that are no longer available to them, or because we just frankly don't have the time to consider their value, that's in Jesus' mind, there's a real departure from goodness. So those are some thoughts about this particular text and the fact it's coming up this week. And I couldn't help but think just last thought about how many children actually in the world, children and youth, are often great leaders, not probably in the way the disciples are thinking, but great leaders in terms of showing us the way to the future.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's really remarkable. And we choose to ignore their voices at our peril, would be my thought.
Totally agree.
So some thoughts on this story.
I think that's fantastic. I was challenging my own mental picture of the story as you were saying it, as you were telling us the scripture from Matthew. And I realized I was thinking about the crowd, and I was thinking about, the disciples huddled together and then the child. And I initially pictured a little boy. And then I was thinking it would probably have been even more shocking. And forgive me, I don't remember if it was the child was gendered in the story, but I was thinking, what if that child was a little girl, which would have been even lower in the state of what?
Correct.
Of that culture.
And
what that did in my brain to sort of my preconceived ideas of the story. And then what is that? So what do you think about, let's tackle the first part first for just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So to become like a child, what qualities, we talked about playfulness and creativity,
Mm-hmm.
which I think are like the nice takeaways of the story.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the more challenging, and what do you think are the qualities of children that Jesus was maybe getting to beyond those qualities?
Well, if I put it in its first century context, and this is a word we've used a lot because we've talked about Brene Brown before and her books and, her writings about vulnerability. I don't think you've got many people living in first century Palestine who are more vulnerable than children. Again, unless someone has a highly communicable disease, and many people did. But that's the first thing that comes to mind. Vulnerability. So all of the layers that we think of adding onto children or childlikeness in 21st century probably don't work here at all.
Okay.
So vulnerability would be one. Weakness is another. Unless you become as a child, there's a kind of a weakness there. And I would say it's a weakness leading to dependence, which means that there's a community aspect of this.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's part of it. And, Jesus is pretty consistently inviting his disciples to be vulnerable enough and open enough to see themselves in partnership with God. So I think there's a trust component, and again, I do think about children, as people especially who are searching for trust. They want to know that there are adults in the world they can trust. Yeah. Like my older brothers, couldn't always trust them when I was growing up. There's about 15 years difference. And I thought, I was always worried they were going to leave me behind. And I think that was a justifiable worry, right?
Parents, yeah.
So, it's the trust factor here. And so I think that's part of it. And maybe Jesus also sees that in children, there is a kind of, I don't want to push this too far. I don't want to romanticize children, but there is a kind of innocence, that's there as children are growing up.
Sure.
And I think that's so precious. We want children to be able to grow into a world where that innocence is not smashed or damaged. And I think maybe there's something of that in this too. And sometimes I will go back and reread books that I loved as a child because there's actually a little bit of innocence there. It's not that there isn't tragedy or sadness or loss.
A
lot of those
are always dying in all of those. Have we noticed the moms are always dying?
Yeah, or somebody, right? I know. Do you know what? Little aside here.
Yeah.
I had not read Pippi Longstocking for ages.
Oh, nice choice.
Went back and started to reread that. Her parents die. At the very beginning of this, and she is alone in this giant house, but she's incredibly inventive and tough. She says, I will always come out on top. I do wonder if Jesus in his role, was maybe seeing something that we probably just can never see and know. But thinking about Jesus going from town to town, can we not imagine some children, boys and girls, like running along and, throwing rocks, I don't know, teasing each other, and that there's a kind of vitality there, even despite the impoverished circumstances. And maybe Jesus picks up on that. Just a quick memory.
Do it.
When I was living in Bennington, Vermont, I was the director. This is many, many years ago. I was the director of the playground system there. And I came to know some children who lived in a very impoverished part of the town. And I went to visit that. We were going to try to develop a program there. And there was a man who kind of had oversight of that public housing area. And he was a tough guy. He was a World War II veteran. And this little boy came out, and they'd had this jungle gym set down out in back, and it was horrible condition. And this little boy comes out and he said, I can do a flip on those bars. And I'm looking at it thinking, don't do that. And so my friend, his name was Sam Bagley. He said, well, don't stand here talking about it. Do it. And this little boy just did this complete flip, perfect flip. And I think, is it possible that Jesus sees something that, again, we can't be sure. We don't want to read too much into it, but who knows? Unless you become like a child. But I think it's to your point. So what's a child like? asking that question. And how do we become like that? People are always so often will say, how do I grow my faith? How do I become more loving? Well, here's the response Jesus gives.
Yeah.
Become like a child. So now we got to step back and say, what's a child? What does a child know that we've forgotten?
I'm very interested in the interrelational part of that you were speaking to, and this idea of like, you like to talk about being a good receiver.
I do.
You do. I like that. I like it very much. But that there is an element of that children don't. Oh, well, my child doesn't second guess being handed something, right? She's like, oh, I couldn't possibly. She's like, thank you.
Right.
She says, thank you. So I'll take that. But it's like, but there is this like, you take care of me and I'll take, the like,
yes.
There's an acceptance.
No hesitation.
Of receiving. There's a comfort level with receiving there that I feel like adults get weird about.
I agree. That's a great point. I just heard someone the other day, someone said someone had offered them. They said, no, and I thought, why? Why?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the resistance in that?
Right.
So that's a great point.
We all want to be so independent.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to, there is a sense in which Jesus is saying these children are highly dependent. And maybe this is actually the thing we might need to discover about community at this point, because a lot of times, I mean, how many times over the years have I heard people say, don't help me, I've got this, I don't like to be dependent on other people.
Right.
But when you're in a community, you are. Other people are dependent on you and vice versa.
Literally how it works.
And I think now signs seem to indicate that people are coming back into community because actually they realize that they might be quite alone and even more fragile and vulnerable if they're disconnected. And if someone were to say to me, I think I'm just coming here because I need community, I would say, well, what do you think Jesus would think of that? Become like a child. They need community. Yeah. Immediate family, yes, but maybe something even broader than that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great comment.
I think that's very interesting. This idea of community is this sort of shared dependency. And since when did dependency become such a bad word in American culture?
Yeah. I was even hearing, that old song, I Did It My Way, Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
I heard a story recently from one of my colleagues who said he never actually liked that song. Really? And I think that it might have been even inscribed on his monument in the cemetery where he was buried, interestingly enough. Mm-hmm. But when the memorial stone apparently was defaced, vandalized, this was maybe 20 years after he died, I believe his family chose to put something, they put something about he was father, grandfather, something. In other words, emphasizing the community relationship because that was more important. So I can't vouch for the 100% truthfulness, but a colleague of mine told that story recently. To me, that if that is true, it speaks of someone who is saying, I'm not really comfortable with that message. I don't think that's a healthy message. Even if it isn't true, it's a good story arc.
I like it.
Someone moving from over dependence on self to something. We're never independent. If anyone just takes a few minutes, take a piece of paper and a pen and just jot down all of the relationships we depend on all the time, whether it's the person helping you at the store or the person who developed the iPhone that you use or whatever it is.
How our food is grown, or who takes care of our roads and gets us electricity.
I mean, it starts to get up into the hundreds and thousands of people.
It's giant. We're the spider web. You see those pictures of like the the internet and all those like techie pictures, and that's really our connection, our like neural.
Yes.
Our whole world.
Yep. And I think it's just we're not seeing accurately when we think of that so-called independence. If I was going to change independence to, I would say independence.
Oh.
That would be my take.
Oh, I'm making that a social media post. I like that.
Because that's how communities thrive.
Yeah.
And we know that communities, being in community is not easy. But we also know from, studies, I think, that people are beginning to publish about what it takes to foster healthy relationships. Even the relationships that don't feel smooth and always nourishing, there's a value there because we're learning how to negotiate, navigate, and smooth out the rough edges if we can, accept them if we can't, learn from them when possible. This is something that clearly we don't know how to do very well right now. And we don't have the leadership politically in all instances. I don't want to include everyone in this under this umbrella, but for the most part, we don't have that right now. So we've got to build it back.
Yeah.
So Jesus didn't have the luxury of that when he was alive.
Right.
It wasn't like he could say, they're really good people in Rome.
Yeah.
I mean, he was saying, I'm going to construct a different kind of kingdom. There's a different kind of kingdom that God wants to construct. So let's pay attention to that. And it's not going to be easy because it's going to sometimes rub up against the kingdom of Rome. And in fact, right before this passage, it's so interesting that sometimes it's really important to pay attention to the order of things as the stories are told. But right before this, Jesus tells his disciples that he's going to suffer and die.
Right before this?
Right before this.
And they're like, great. So which one of us is better?
Right. So let's get that out of the way right now because it's like, he may not. How much longer did you say you're going to,
I'm just picturing them in the corner like rock, paper, scissors.
Right. Good Lord. What a thing, talk about.
Goodness.
Thank you for being so sensitive.
Thanks, guys.
So he says that, interestingly enough, and then talks about the importance of child, which is a super vulnerable image.
Right.
So he's not going to protect himself. He knows that when you push back against the state will push back against you. Nobody relinquishes power easily. So he's delivered the message clearly, and here we are. But he still affirms the value of the least valuable according to the social standards of the time.
I think it's fantastic. I do want to touch on the stumbling block a little bit.
Yep.
The phrase stumbling block is very interesting to me.
Yeah. I don't know what that means culturally.
Yeah.
No, I'd have to really dig into that a little bit. It gives you, it sounds like something that's deliberate, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that
the image is certainly easy enough to conjure in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something, whether that's a stone or whatever it is that somebody puts in front of someone else to trip them up. It's basically, I think, what it comes down to. And that's what clearly he lived in a world where that was happening to children, definitely happening to women, and definitely happening to people with diseases. So look at Jesus. If you go through the entire lifetime of Jesus, look at all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, remove every story that has to do with a child, a woman, or someone who's sick. You're not going to have much left.
A couple pages.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's always, it seems to me, he's always watchful of those who've been pushed to the margins. Now, again, it might seem, in his day, it might have seemed that pushing children to the margin, so what? They're expendable. You hope you have as many as you can because somehow they'll help the family agriculturally or whatever, but it's a very sort of utilitarian view of children, not 21st century view of children. So, here he is, constantly interacting with groups off to the margins. And these days, if people complain, why pay attention to this group? They seem statistically small. Why pay attention to that group? On and on it goes. You can fill in the blanks. There's always somebody who's being targeted as being expendable or not worthy of our attention. Well, sorry. Jesus spent his entire lifetime giving attention to people who were functionally invisible from the standpoint, I think, of both the state and in many cases, I think, religious leaders. And even sometimes just folks. I mean, how many times does Jesus someone reaches out to him and people say, hey, shut up. The religious man is here. He doesn't have time for this, riffraff. But it's Jesus who stops because he listens to the one nobody's listening to. And that is such incredible good news if you happen to be in that group that is such a minority and nobody thinks you're worth anything or worth paying attention to go back and read those stories and see how Jesus acknowledges those tiny slivers of the population. I mean, not the case of women and children necessarily, but for those who are ill, it's really, that's good news.
Good news.
That's the heart of the good news. And I think that that's really important to savor and keep right in our focus this year and onward.
Yeah, because it's deeply challenging
Mm-hmm.
to those who will either through just not thinking of it or through active efforts
Mm-hmm.
happily
Mhm.
shove others aside.
Yeah, I think right now we're seeing the development of policies, especially at the federal level, that are basically designed to undermine the health of people, access to health care, treatment for children's illnesses, on and on and on it goes. So plenty of stumbling blocks out there.
Yeah.
And now I would say, as it used to be said, it has been said at times at critical moments and history, especially over the last 50 or 60 years, this is what might be called, using Little Ancient Greek, a kairos moment, crisis moment. And those moments are always asking us to be counted. How are we going to, make sure that we're not complicit by our silence or even by our support of some of those policies? That's what kairos moments call people to attention.
Yeah.
And call people to action. And I think also call people to community, because you're not going to make a very big impact if it's one person.
Yeah.
You can start something for sure,
Right.
but it's really behooves us to ask the question, who do I want to go with me?
Right.
Which is actually a question children do ask, right? They were like, who do I want to go with? Who do I want to share this experience with?
Yeah. I love, there's something that my daughter does when she did this when she was little, and she would, to me, it's like the symbol of just that childlike trust and dependence. If she wouldn't be like, hold my hand, she would just like reach her hand out when she needed help, like balancing, or when she was first learning to walk, needed balancing or trying to navigate some stairs. She would just hold her hand out.
Yeah, love that. What a great image.
And she just know
Wow.
that hand was coming. And I was like, that is the most beautiful. And the reason I say it, she did that at gymnastics the other day. She just, and then thankfully the teacher saw her and was like, oh, and like came over, but like took a second, but she just sort of.
I was using both arms out for gymnastics.
Oh yeah, well she needed, yes.
That is a wonderful image.
But that idea that like the hand is out and there's no like, oh, is anybody gonna?
Yep.
And what? And I'm sad for the day when she will doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that looks like in poetic terms, but
I think she's always going to have that space.
Well, I mean, or any child.
Yes.
Right? There's always that like
moment. As you grow up, the parental hand is not always there.
Sure. But
it's built into the mind. I can always reach out for that hand, even if they're not around. I know they got me.
Yeah. And do we not hope that as communities that we can be that?
Yeah.
That people will know when they go, which takes courage now, right? It takes courage to kind of be like reaching a hand out to your community as an adult, because as we were discussing earlier, dependency is somehow become a 4-letter word.
Yeah,
we
right.
As a community can be like, got you.
Yeah, it's a different shade of dependence, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking, Leslie, that I'm connected with an organization that has nothing to do with the church really whatsoever. but I know people in this organization and they know me, and I hadn't been around this group for a while. And so a few of them started sending me some messages, said, hey, we haven't seen you for a while. And I wrote back and I said, I have had some issues I've had to deal with in terms of my family and also my brother, and also some laryngitis and a few other things. And I said, but I'll be back. And they said, just want you to know, we got your back.
Oh,
And I think, we probably don't do that in our faith communities nearly as much as we could. Just to say that on a Sunday, I got your back. If something comes up this week, I've got you. Let me know how I can help. And that's the kind of community, because that's a community where you can reach out your arm and someone's going to grab your hand.
Yeah.
So thank you for that marvelous image, of your daughter doing that. I think that's just so precious. And what a great image of this. That may be exactly what Jesus is getting at. That's what it means to become childlike. We're missing out on a lot of life if we can't be dependent on that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for this conversation, Ned. This was
Thank you.
Fascinating.
Marvelous.
Thank you guys so much for joining us here at Round Hill Radio, which is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.